Hi, this is Chase, Outreach Counselor for Kia for Far Western Kentucky. Today, I'm here to share with you a FAFSA walkthrough. If you have any questions about the FAFSA, what is the FAFSA, the FSA IDs, any of that background information, that is not the purpose of today's video. Today, we are strictly doing a walkthrough. So the purpose of this is for you to see how start to finish a student completes a FAFSA. Now, before beginning, you as a student and at least one parent will need an FSA ID. That's just a username and a password for the FAFSA. If you're sitting at home and you're thinking to yourself, hey, I don't actually live at home with mom or dad, stay with me because there's going to be a special section that's going to help us address those questions that we may have about something called dependency. So before getting started, I just want you to know this is actually a test data website. This is not an actual FAFSA or real student information. So I will be entering some placeholders, but just know when you go to complete your FAFSA and you have your W-2 and you have your tax returns, what you're going to do is enter the information as accurately as is possible. So to begin, let's go ahead. Click on I am the student. And at this point, what you want to do is log in with the FSA ID and password that you've already created. Once you complete that, click Next. Here's just a disclaimer. I encourage you to read through this information. If you agree, click Accept and proceed. In order to get started, one of the most important decisions we can make is which FAFSA we select. In this case, we always want to look toward the academic year we're hoping to receive financial aid for. So in this case, we're looking at the 2020-2021 financial aid year. So let's go ahead and click on that. Immediately, we're asked for a save key. For my purposes, I encourage students to create a 4-digit number that is easy for them to remember. The save key is a saving feature that allows us actually to click save at any point in the FAFSA, to log out, to log back in and enter that 4-digit code, and then go to the last place we click the save button. Once you've done that, click Next. Be patient with the system. Occasionally, depending on the volume, you may see processing issues like this that take just a little bit longer, but just stick with it. All right, here we have a frequently asked questions information page. If you'd like to, you're welcome to click into these when you're completing the FAFSA, but for our purposes, let's just click Next. I'd like to highlight a couple of things for you before we get started. The first is at the top, there's a navigation bar here that gives us several options, most importantly, that Save button right there. You can click that at any point. Keep in mind the FAFSA is automatically saving your data, but just like any web-based system, there is the option that, or the chance that it's going to crash. And so we click that Save button pretty frequently to make sure our data saves. Additionally, what you can see here is an information section that tells you exactly what portion of the FAFSA you're on. You can see as I try to move forward, we're actually not able to click forward through the FAFSA. We have to complete an entire section, and this icon will change from the blue pencil to a green check mark that looks like this before we can move into the next section. So just a couple of different things. Now, once you have completed a section at any point in the FAFSA, you can return to a previously completed section, but just keep in mind you cannot skip through. Last thing I want you to keep in mind here is that we do have some question marks here. Those will give us little bits of information that clarify a question you may have. So if at any point you're not sure exactly what it is that the question's asking, you're going to click on that question mark. It's going to give you the information. Now, like I said, this is test data. So this is a fictional student, Brian last name. You can see, and you'll see over the next couple of screens, that several pieces of information already exist. All we do is complete the information that's not populated and click Next. Telephone number. Like I said, not an actual FAFSA, so I'm going to be using some placeholders here. But when you are completing your FAFSA yourself, so important to put in accurate information. Like I mentioned, some of the information will come over from creating that FSA ID, that username and that password. All you need to do here is just verify that that information looks correct and click Next. Answer these questions. Have I lived in Maryland? Like I said, this is a fictional student. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and say yes, and then answer questions about US citizenship. Now, high school completion status, all they're asking is at the end of high school, what will your level of education be? And in this case, most students will either have a GED or a high school diploma. What college degree or certificate will you be working toward? Here is where we want to consider a 4-year bachelor's degree versus a 2-year associate's degree versus a certificate or diploma program. I encourage you to answer as honestly as possible. So in this case, let's say that our fictional student, Brian, is going to attend Murray State University for 4 years. We'll click first bachelor's degree. Will you have your first bachelor's degree before the 2020-2021 school year? In most cases, this will be no. And then what will your college grade level be? Let's say Brian's never attended college. Also, are you interested in being considered for work study? I always encourage students to select yes. That is another type of financial aid, another type of way we may be able to get a little bit of money to work a little bit and help pay for the cost of tuition. At the end of every screen, you will need to select next. You can't press the return button. You'll need to select next. In this case, Brian is male. And if you are male and you will be over 18 years old, you will be asked if you're registered with the Selective Service. That language may be unfamiliar to you. Just know that they mean the draft system. All male citizens over the age of 18 will have to be registered at some point in order to receive federal student aid. And you even get this pop-up message right here. So let's go ahead and say yes, Brian is already registered. He did that on his 18th birthday. But in this case, you also, if you haven't, you can select no, and you have the opportunity to go ahead and register through the FAFSA itself. That's one of the quickest ways for men to do that. But in this case, let's say Brian already did. Let's keep moving forward. Driver's license number, if any. Some students will not have a driver's license. That's totally okay. We're going to go ahead and just enter a couple of numbers right there. And remember that in this case, Brian's from Maryland. Next, we begin to answer a few more questions about Brian. If you're never sure about who it's asking, whose perspective these questions are from, there is a banner right here that will read parent or student information. And then about part of the way through, we'll switch over to parent information. So remember, right now we're in student information still. We're still asking questions about Brian. So was Brian ever part of foster care? Let's go ahead and say no. Highest schooling completed by parent 1. Let's say a high school diploma. And parent 2, maybe they went to college. The thing to keep consistent here, students, is parent 1 versus parent 2. It actually doesn't make a big difference in terms of who you select if you live at home with both parents here. Just keep it consistent. So if mom is parent 1 at the beginning, let's keep mom as parent 1 throughout the whole FAFSA. And you'll see where that pops back up in a moment. School selection. So in this case, I live in the Paducah area. So let's just say that Brian goes to McCracken County. That's in Paducah, in Kentucky. Really important thing for students to know here is you need to click the blue search button. The reason for that, that's going to link us to the official high school postings, okay? So we can click there. When it turns into all caps, we know we are linked to our official high school. Why does that matter? When your high school goes to pull a report to see who has completed and who hasn't completed the FAFSA, this official linking is what actually kind of sets you up with that reporting, okay? So when your guidance counselor or your school counselor or your college or career coach is in the process of figuring out who's done FAFSA and who hasn't, this is a great way to ensure you show up on those lists. Next screen is actually going to look very, very similar. And it's asking Brian here actually to list the 10 colleges and universities he's interested in attending. That being said, Brian may know for sure that he's interested in 1 or 2 or 3 schools. If that's the case, go ahead and just list those. Earlier, I said that he may be attending Murray State University. So let's just search that as Brian's school. I'm going to select the checkbox, and let's go ahead and add one more school so I can give you an example of what that looks like. Select Kentucky, and let's say that he's interested in West Kentucky Tech. That's our local community college here. I can do the same procedure. Click that checkbox and click Next. Now, the next question that the FAFSA will ask Brian is whether he plans to live on campus, at home with his parents, or off campus. Murray State's residential, so let's say he plans to live in a dorm, a residence hall. In West Kentucky isn't, it's a community college, so let's say he plans to live at home with his parents. Why this is important: when your financial aid offices are trying to make the determination about whether or not to include housing as part of your financial aid package, this is where they get that information. So make sure you're as accurate as you can be on this. As of today, what is Brian's marital status? And sometimes students pause and they say, "Are you asking about my mom or dad?" Remember, we're looking at student information still. Let those banners guide us on whose information we're asking for. Marital status, let's say Brian is single. He's not married. Now, I mentioned before, some students may find themselves in a situation in which they do not actually live at home with one or both biological, adoptive, or step parents. Perhaps you live with an aunt or an uncle, or perhaps you're temporarily homeless, or perhaps you have a child of your own that you support. These next couple of screens are going to clarify any of those questions. And what we do, we call that dependency. And you can see that reflected right here in that tab, dependency status. So, a couple of questions here. Do you now or will you have children who receive more than half of your support between July 1st of 2020 and June 30th of 2021? Let's say in Brian's case, no. But if you were to have a child during this time frame, you would select yes. Does Brian have any other dependents? Let's go ahead and say no. Now, what we have here, another list of qualifying circumstances that may create an independent status for Brian. That would mean he does not need mom or dad's information on the FAFSA. Read through these carefully, and remember, if any of these you feel uncertain about, click on that question mark right there and get a little bit more clarification. I won't read all of these for the sake of time. Just know that questions like, are you a member of the active duty? Are you an emancipated minor? Anytime since 13 were you in foster care? Does someone other than a biological parent have legal guardianship of you? Here is where those questions will be answered by students. In this case, let's say Brian has none of them. We'll click none of the above. Another clarifying question: on or after July 1st of 2019, were you homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? Let's go ahead and say no. So here what we have is an automatically generated answer from the FAFSA that tells us you are considered a dependent student. Based on everything that you've answered, we think that you probably have at least one parent that's providing some sort of support whose information we will need. Students, read these questions carefully. What you need to do is answer, "I will provide information about my parents unless it is actually impossible for you so to do." What I mean by that, I don't mean, it's hard, we're not all home at the same time, and I may have to call to get some of the info. What I mean here is actually being physically unable. You can't locate them, you don't have a phone number, or perhaps it's even unsafe to contact your parents. Otherwise, if the FAFSA says you're a dependent student, you probably will have to provide some information about your parents. Click next. Now, here what I want you to see is that the banner has changed to parent information. Okay, so that is a little bit different than what we've seen before. Now, let's indicate the marital status of our parents. I'm going to say that Brian's parents are divorced. So one of the first questions, and this is something I deal with pretty commonly, is, what if my parents are divorced? What do I do in that case? The FAFSA will ask you for an estimated date. So let's say January of 2018, Brian's parents split up. And then we have the question of whose information will be provided. Let's go ahead and say mom's information. Now, I get this question more than most questions dealing with the FAFSA. If my parents are divorced, how do I determine whose information to use? The question is, where does the student spend more than 50% of his or her time? And if it truly is a 50-50 split, who spends more than 50% of the support for the student? In this case, let's say that Brian spends 4 days a week with mom, 3 days with dad. Mom's information would be provided. Now, here's an important note. We always ask that question about the biological parent. If mom is remarried, remember that as of today, her marital status would actually be married or remarried. But in this case, if mom is still not married, we're going to say she's divorced and only use mom's information. If there is a step parent involved, even if they got married the day before we submitted this FAFSA, their information becomes part of the FAFSA as well. But the first question to ask yourself is which biological parent's information do I use? And the second question is that parent married as of today? So let's click next. Mother's social security number, like I said, this is fake information because this is a test site. I'm just going to put in a little bit of information here. Remember, these placeholders will not work on the actual FAFSA. We want that data as accurate as possible. But for the sake of demonstration, we're going to use that. All right, household size. The question and the best way to simplify this is for me to ask students, if everybody in your house is home for dinner, how many people is that? In this case, you can see we've already got represented Brian's mom and himself. Right here, we would include any other children that his mother supports. So if I have 2 other siblings that live with mom and myself, let's go ahead and put 2 there. This field right here, it's actually grayed out because this is a calculation. This is added to this, is added to this, is added to this, and you come up with this number. This number that's highlighted down here, that's the number that answers that question. If everyone's home for dinner, how many people should that be? If in Brian's case it's 4, we've got mom, we've got Brian, and we've got 2 other siblings. Right here, it asks how many are going to be in college in the fall. Let's just say 1. Brian is the first going off to college. All right. As you can see, we're zipping along through this. We're answering questions. We're seeing how far we've gotten. We are into the nitty-gritty with some financials, and I'll provide some explanation for some of these things coming up. But just know, very, very quickly, once we've already created those FSA IDs, a lot of that information comes over, and we can speed through this pretty quickly. All right. For 2018, has your mother completed her IRS tax return? Let's say yes, she's already completed. Students, if you're watching this, this is a great time to sit down with your mom or your dad or both and really answer these questions together. It is a little bit more difficult to do it over the phone or to do it while trying to answer them based on information you know. Remember, we always want precise and accurate data. What type of income tax? Let's say IRS 1040. And for 2018, how did she file her taxes? Let's say head of household. Now, here's a moment I'm going to tell you to do as I say and not as I do. What I would encourage you all to do is to click this link to the IRS box. Now, for the purposes of this demo site, I've actually never been able to make it work in a case in which we're able to successfully link taxes because remember, this is a test site. It's to show you what the FAFSA looks like. It's not to pull any actual tax records from the IRS. Just know if you do want to do that, and I encourage you to, it cuts down on verification. It automatically makes sure your info is correct in real time. Go ahead and click that and follow through those guided steps. This is the point at which your parent will need an FSA ID if they don't have one already. So remember, like I said at the beginning, make sure both student and parent have that FSA ID. Now, sometimes in cases of divorce or for other reasons, we can't actually link to the IRS. So I will show you what that process looks like. Just remember, it is a best practice to go ahead and link to the IRS if you are able to. See, here we have another kind of warning message. It's really best to link to the IRS. If you can, go ahead and do that. Like I said, click that link when you're filing this on your own. We're just for the purposes of demonstration going to move forward. Now, we have some questions we're going to have to manually input because we did not complete the IRS data retrieval tool. So it asks, what's your mother's AGI from 2018? You'll even see that it tells you where on the tax form and which line specifically to find that at. So let's say mom's AGI was $42,000. We can click next. How much did she actually earn? Let's say about $45,000. Remember, I am using these numbers for the purposes of demonstration. You will want to take some time and actually look on the W-2s and the tax forms to pull the accurate information. That is so important for students to realize. Did mom file a Schedule 1? That's what this question's getting at. Some parents will, some parents won't. Answer as honestly as you can. Remember that don't know on FAFSA is actually treated as a no. So if you're not sure, it's worth going ahead and checking to make sure you get that answer correct rather than answering don't know. Enter the amount of your mother's income tax. So let's say mom paid about $4,500 in income tax. Remember, it tells you which form and exactly which lines you're looking at to pull that information. Now we have several different types of untaxed income. I won't read through these for the purposes of time. Just know you want to read through each of these items individually. Are there any of these that sound correct that maybe mom received? If you're not sure what they are, click on that question mark and get a little bit of clarification. Or if your parents are with you, or if you are a parent and you're with your student, make sure that you take a look at this and make sure to see if any of these sound like you. These are less common than some of the different types of income I see, so we're going to keep zeros there and click next. Here is a common category where folks have some information to input. Child support your mother paid because of divorce or separation. So did she actually pay anything? Are there other siblings that live perhaps in your father's household that she's helping to support? If so, you would enter that right here. A couple of other categories you'll make sure to read through carefully and click next. Here we have kind of the flip, which is, does mom receive any type of child support? And in this case, it's for all children. So keep in mind, in Brian's case, where he's got 2 siblings, perhaps mom receives about, let's say, $1,200 a month for the care of all 3 children. We would include that here. Now, if that's a monthly estimate, what you'll do is you can multiply that by 12 and arrive at your full answer. So let's say that that's about, we'll just guess here, about $14,500 for the whole year. What you want to do, though, in a real case, get that precise number. How much does mom, in this case, get every single month? And let's multiply that by 12. Housing benefits. And here is a common question that I see where folks have a qualifying earning. This is tax-deferred pensions. So if your parents, or if a parent is listening to this, if your employer does some sort of pension matching where they put some money into a retirement account for you, pay special attention on your W-2, and it tells you exactly what boxes and which codes to look for. And pay attention to if you or your spouse, if applicable, have any amounts in there, because we want to claim that as well. And at the very bottom, other untaxed income, workers' comp, disability, etc. You can enter that as well. Let's click next. Here we have an opportunity. It says, do you want to skip questions about your mother's assets? If it asks you that, you are well within your rights to say yes. And if you'd like to go ahead and answer because you feel there's some important information, you can say no and go ahead and list that out. But if it gives you the opportunity, you can skip those questions. All right, we're nearing completion here. What we have will look almost identical to the parent financial section, but now we're back in student information, and we're asking if Brian worked in 2018. Let's say that he's not going to file taxes. So maybe he didn't work for 2018. That's fairly common for our students. If they did work in 2018, you can click Already Completed, and you'll move through that process. In this case, let's say he didn't file, he doesn't plan to file, we'll go ahead and move forward. How much did he earn? So there is a chance that Brian, maybe he babysat, maybe he mowed lawns, maybe he worked part-time but didn't quite hit the threshold in order to file taxes. If Brian, though, has an estimate of what he made, let's go ahead and enter that as a good faith effort. So let's say about $650. Remember, we want these pieces of information as accurate as is possible. We'll click next. Additional questions, like I said, these will mirror the parent financial information questions. Just make sure to read through all of these again. If none of them are applicable, and it's fairly uncommon for many of these to be applicable for the student, go ahead and just leave zeros in there. Do you want to skip remaining questions about your assets? You can say yes. I'm going to say no, just so you can see what it looks like when you answer questions about assets. You'll always see these three categories: total current balance of cash, savings, and checking, net worth of investments, including real estate, and I'll give you a little bit of info about that, and then your net worth of current business or investment farms. Do not include a family farm or business with fewer than 100 full-time employees. So the first one is pretty straightforward. Does Brian have any money saved up that he could perhaps use toward college? Let's say he's got $2,000 he's put away. Does Brian have any investments, including real estate that is not his home? Now, in most students' cases, the assets will be in the name of their parents, not them. So we would indicate this in the parent financial section. But in this case, if he doesn't, we'll just put a 0. Same thing with businesses. It's unlikely most of our students have either a farm or a business with over 100 full-time employees. Often for our small businesses with families, they few or rarely, if ever, that I work with have fewer than 100 than 100 employees. So if you do not employ more than 100 full-time staff members, those assets don't actually count. We can put 0 there. All right. Are you a preparer? 99.99% of the time, unless you have paid someone to do this for you, you will click no and next. What we have here is a summary of all of Brian's questions, all of the answers, every single thing that we went through. Okay, so we'll scroll all the way to the bottom. As a best practice, I encourage you to read through this and make sure everything looks correct. Nothing's duplicated, nothing's omitted that should be there, nothing looks funny to you. Afterward, you'll click next. You will need to do both a student and a parent signature. So for student signature, you'll click the box and you'll have some terms and conditions that you'll need to read before submitting. If you agree, click next, and click sign. Now, to submit your FAFSA, you actually will go through the exact same process on the right side. Click provide parent signature, enter that information, click that sign button, and then where previous is, you'll actually see a submit button. You are not fully completed until you hit that submit button, so that is so important. Now, like I said, this is test data, so there isn't necessarily a parent that links up with Brian's fictional information, so this is as far as I'll be able to proceed. But for the purposes of this video, I hope you found it instructive just to quickly go through what the FAFSA looks like and answer some of those quick questions that we often get. I hope you'll consider subscribing to us here on our Kia YouTube channel. Tons of new content will be coming soon, and we always look forward to hearing from you. So like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let us know what types of college admissions and financial aid questions you are most eager to hear. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you soon.